Good morning, boys and girls, today. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you had a good weekend. So I wanted to talk to you about two different pages of the reference table in today's video. We're going to be using these pages a lot today. You're going to get practice questions with them, but these are actually the last two pages of the reference table that you have to know this year. So that's kind of why I'm going over these with you. I think it's just easier to see it on the reference table. So first of all, this is page 3. So if you want to take a minute to have page 3 out in front of you while you're watching this, that might be useful to you. So you can always pause the video and do that. Actually, well, you're going to be watching it with me, so I'll give you a minute. And once you have it out, what we'll do is we'll just take a look at it. So if you notice here, this page really just shows all the different rocks that make up New York State, right? But what it does is it shows us the rocks by age, right? So if you look here down at the bottom, which I've highlighted, these are all the different rocks, right? And it shows them with these names next to them called Cretaceous and Silurian and Ordovician and Proterozoic, all these fancy words. These represent time periods, which we're going to talk about on page 8 and 9 in a minute or so. But basically, it just classifies the rocks. The oldest rocks are on the bottom, okay? And they get younger as we go to the top. So I'm just going to draw an arrow, and I'm going to put a Y here to show that the younger rocks are on the top and the oldest rocks are on the bottom. And if you recall, we talked about superposition. We said that older rocks are buried beneath younger rocks. So, you know, if you find Cretaceous rocks, so for example, let's say you find some Devonian age rock, which is like the Finger Lakes region over here, because it's the same pattern, right? That dots, dots. Probably below that could be some Silurian or Ordovician rock, right? Because those guys are older or below it. So that's something to keep in mind. Our oldest rocks are up here, or most of them are up here, right? In the Taconic, the middle Proterozoic here, the nicest quartzes, marbles, and shales. So really all this page is just kind of reviewing and looking carefully at the different rocks in the different places. The city's labeled on here so that you can see that. Remember our latitude and longitude, which we talked a little bit about, is on here. So these are all different things that you need to understand. You're going to get a practice diagram questions that really make you analyze this diagram, but I just wanted to show you it just to give you an idea of what it was about. Okay, the next part of our video is going to be to take a look at pages 8 and 9, so I'm going to just go to those. Now, what I did for you to make your life easier was I posted just this page on Google Classroom. Okay, so you have it, because if you don't have a printed out reference table, it's very hard to go back and forth, because you really need to look at these two pages together because they connect with each other. So that's why I'm showing it to you like this, and I strongly suggest that when you're looking at it, you look at it like this. You can just look at this screen for now, because I'm going to go through it with you because there's a lot to unpack on here. But when you start doing the questions, which I'm going to ask you some questions on the Nearpod after based on this video, I want you to be able to understand it. So have that diagram ready. Okay, so the first thing is this diagram is broken. This is the geologic history of New York State, right? It's not of the world, but it's just of New York State. It focuses on that. But what it does is it breaks things down. So any good scientist likes to break things down and make it simpler, but in doing so, sometimes it ends up becoming more complex. So what they did was this. They took all of Earth's history and put it on one page here, right? So that, at least for New York, so that's a lot. So the first thing we're going to look at is the left side of the diagram, right? There's this term called eon, era, period, and epoch. All of these, okay, I'm just going to label them. All of these have to do with time. Okay, so when you're looking at this section of the diagram, those all have to do with time. The biggest representation of time would be eon, followed by era would be a little bit smaller, period is a little bit smaller, and epoch is smaller. What do I mean by that? I mean that, look, the Phanerozoic eon, right, makes up 1, 2, 3 eras, the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. So all of those eras make up one eon, right? But if I look at just the Cenozoic, look, I have 1, 2, 3 periods. And within each period, I have epochs, right? So in the Paleogene, for example, I have the Paleocene, the Eocene, and the Oligocene. So all of this, so we're basically subdividing, right? It's like your family, your parents, you and your siblings. That's basically what we're talking about. But if you notice here, there's two different scales. There's numbers here, right? And there's numbers here. Though they both give us dates or about how long ago things happened. But what they did was, around 542 million years ago, life started to develop on Earth, right? They call that the Cambrian explosion. There was a little bit before that, but most things happened within the last approximately 500 million years. So that's what we call the Phanerozoic. All of this, right, I'm going to even shade it in, just so you get an idea here, occurred in the last 500 million years. So what they did was, well, they're like, well, look, we still have stuff that happened before then, right? We still have the things that happened here, but not as much happened then. So they decided to expand this little chunk. So they took these last 500 million years and they expanded it out to this whole green area here. And if I look at this line now, I can see very specific things that happened, right? For example, in the Cambrian, it was from 542 million years ago to 488. And these are the first things that happened with living things around that time. Less things happened before 542 million years ago, right? So we call this the Precambrian, and it's divided by the Archean and the Proterozoic and the Middle, Late, and Early, right? And you can see some things happened, but not as much. So if you want to know how old the Earth is, you look at the very beginning. It says estimated time of origin of the Earth in the solar system. It's 4,600 million years ago, right? But like I said, most of the stuff happened here. So that's where we're going to focus, okay? I can look at life on Earth during that time, right? I can look at the kind of bedrock that was present in New York State at that time. For example, most of our bedrock is from the Precambrian, right? We have a little bit, actually, I'm sorry, that's not even true. Most of our bedrock is from the Paleozoic, right? Because this area here is all Paleozoic bedrock. I have a little bit in the Jurassic and Triassic, and I don't actually have any bedrock from there on in. The rest of it is just sediment. I can also look at fossils that existed, right? These lines represent families of fossils. So, for example, the trilobites was a whole type of, it's like a whole type of fossil. Now, there are many different varieties or species of trilobites, but trilobites existed for a very long time. The letters represent specific trilobites that lived at specific times. So, for example, A, which is Elliptocephala, right, it's the first one. He lived in the Cambrian between 542 and 488 million years ago. However, one of his counterparts, Phacops, lived in the Devonian. So the letters represent specific organism fossils that lived at a certain time. So those are fossils. Next is important geologic events in New York State. This shows us the different type of mountain building events that happened throughout our Earth's history and how they affected New York State. So really it's just reading them, but they're all there. And the last thing that's really on this diagram that you need to know is this just shows where the continents were, right? So remember we talked about Pangea and we talked about how the continents have been shifting over time. So you could see here that's what this is showing, and the times that those happened at. So I know that there's a lot of information on this diagram, and I would not expect you to be able to process it all right now. But that's why I'm just kind of putting it out there for you to see and watch this video a couple of times. But what we're going to do today during class, after we're done watching this video, is we're going to just practice it. So hopefully this was helpful. I just thought it was easier to go through it all at once. You can, during classwork or homework, you can always look back at this. All right. Talk to you guys soon.